I missed this place. And I am very happy to be the one who gets to do this. So we are back in Ephesians chapter 5. And we are going to start with verse 6, which, if you can remember, we have actually touched. Before we deviated for our very traditional Christmas, we did cover some of this, and I intentionally went back because it's a larger section and it's awkward to chop it into parts anyways, but I also know my limitations. So as you turn to Ephesians chapter 5, starting with verse 6, I will also remind you that this morning Dennis read for you the shortest verse in the Bible. And it beats Jesus wept, because in Greek, technically, rejoice always is one word, where Jesus wept is two. So the next time you're playing Bible games and somebody says, what's the shortest verse? You can now argue correctly that Jesus wept is not the right answer. And you can start a fight. Because that's what I want. Not really. But speaking of things we should be striving for, instead of starting fights over Bible trivia games, Ephesians chapter 5, verses 6 through 14. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not be partakers with them. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness and righteousness and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. For it is disgraceful even to speak of the things which are done by them in secret. But all these things become visible when they are exposed by the light. For everything that becomes visible is light. For this reason it says, awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. And I really want to read 2 through 21, but we'll stop and pray. Father God, we thank you that you are active in our lives. I thank you that you are not a past tense God, and you are not a future tense God in exclusivity, but that you are all of these things and as a present help for us. God, I thank you that nothing escapes your notice, nothing escapes your gesture, and I thank you that you love us. And I thank you that you allow us to do your work. And I would just ask that you would help us to take that seriously, and that we would seriously commit to being people who model you. And in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. So as quick as I can do it, flyover of the book, because it's been a while since we've been here. Chapter 1, you will remember, has a thanksgiving and a doxology. So he praises God for how great he is. He praises God for all of the great things that God does. And he thanks God for all of the great things that he does. Then as chapter 2 and 3 and 4 progress, he reminds us that unity only comes by good doctrine. Paul's letters typically will break into two camps as he is writing them, that you have orthodoxy, right belief, leads to then orthopraxy, right practice. And that you shouldn't, or that you can't really have one without the other. You can't believe rightly and actually believe it, and then go and do things that are totally contrary to that. For instance, if I think that life is sacred, I'm not going to beat you to death. These two things don't jive. If I believe that honesty and integrity are important, I don't lie. If I believe, whatever, then I don't do the opposite of it. And as one of my favorite teachers once said, when what we say and what we do disagree, what we do is what we meant. And that's fairly common. And this passage is getting us back to, as it's the beginning part of the orthopraxy part. And he is beginning to remind us there are those people who behave wickedly because they're in the dark. They're not saved. They are lost. They are not God's children, and therefore they do what they do. They act naturally. You don't do that. And his reason for that is this sense of what has come right before the passage that we started with, is the notion of those are children of the dark, and immorality should not be named among you. As Christians, you should be marked differently, and it should be very apparent when people meet you that your behavior is excellent. Some of the examples from the Old Testament that we have of this are people like Daniel, who when his friends, and I use that term not in the traditional sense, but when his co-workers, the other people wanted to accuse him, what did they had to set him up, because they can't find anything wrong with him. You can imagine if there was a political leader, and I don't mean this to be a comedy, but this one's going to be kind of a joke, who the opponents of the politician had to look really hard to find something that was wrong. You spend 5 minutes on a Google search and you can sink anybody now, right? But in this particular case, Daniel's opponents, his co-workers, the people he was around all the time, had nothing that they could say, yeah, this is his big character defect. Job is the same way. No one can find and say, and this is what the blameless character means. It is not necessarily that they didn't do anything wrong. It is instead that they didn't do anything overtly. That it was not the character of their life. What is the character of our lives? And this is what Paul is reminding us. And what's going to come later on, and it's going to take us a few weeks to get there, is he's going to take certain very specific and raw interactions and say, in these, you better be above board. So in husbands and wives. Because if you're going to be a flunky, and if you're going to be a liar, and you're going to be a fraud, your wife, your husband are probably the first ones to notice. And if that's not enough, he also will then go to children. Because children are going to be very good about seeing the real you. They're going to mimic what you show as important. They're going to be very, very transparent about that. That's why several of my teacher friends will tell me, I know what kind of a parent people are just by their children. That's kind of scary to me. But in the course of things, like we see this, and also there's the master-slave, which is not the same as worker-employee. You can make parallels, but it's not the same. Because I can quit my job anytime I want to. Slaves don't get to go on holiday. Okay? But the passage that we are dealing with today is very much, don't be deceived. Don't be those people who say one thing and do another. If you're saved, act like it. Okay, that's my summary statement. So my purpose for preaching the sermon today is act like a Christian if you're going to be a Christian. Yeah, see? Might turn a new leaf in the new year, probably not. But here's how we got there. Verse 6, let no one deceive you with empty, certain translations will say vain words. Vain means empty. At least in Bible talk, when you find it in there, that's what they're talking about. So when Ecclesiastes says, vanity, 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 all is vanity, what he's saying is everything is empty. Everything's purposeless, which is exactly why we read that book on a warm, sunshiny day. That book is one that does drive me nuts. It's a good book. You should read it. But get to the end. Just land on the end. Anyway, that's bad advice. But read the last couple of verses and then start at the beginning. And it'll make the whole book. And then you'll go, oh, I see what you're... And it won't be so annoying. Okay. Anyways, I should really repent of that statement. But I'm going to get letters from myself. But don't let anybody deceive you with empty words. We spend a lot of time in our culture telling you why it's okay that your sin is okay. We spend a lot of time in churches telling people why their sin is okay. That's a problem. These are all empty words. If God says, and we're people who follow God, can't really skirt around that. There is a final authority in Christianity. There is a absolute, this is how it goes. And we may not like it. We may like the opposite of that. But at the end of the day, there is an absolute authority for Christians. If you're going to call yourself a little Christ, then you're going to have to be a little Christ. So all of this time that we spend with trying to convince people why their sin's not so bad is just empty. Because at the end of the day, their sin really is that bad. Mm-hmm. Sin is a lot of the reason why people won't come to Christ as well. I mean, think about how many times you've witnessed to somebody and the last thing that they say to kind of, we're done talking about this, is, I know Christians, they're not any different than me. And the problem is they're right. The problem is that most Christians today aren't actually Christians. We just kind of slap a name on it and we run with it, and our behavior is the exact same. There is a book called From Conviction to Belief by Josh McDowell, in which he gives the statistics about how the lives of Christians and the lives of Christian students and then their secular counterparts aren't any different. Christian kids are just as likely to lie as their non-Christian friends. They're actually, I think, more likely to cheat on a test than their non-Christian friends. I thought that one was interesting, but the statistics are a little old because that was at least 12 years ago, because I was single when I read that book. But anyways, in all of that to say, part of the reason that the unbelieving world doesn't come to Christ is because they've met too many Christians. When we deny Christ with our lifestyle, it makes it really hard for somebody to go, oh yeah, there's clearly truth in Christianity. If I'm cheating on my wife while talking about being faithful to my wife, it doesn't work. There's nothing about that makes sense. And people who have half a brain will look and go, no. We're not going down that road. Because clearly you don't know how to do that any better than I do. And that's a problem. So that's why we can't be deceived by empty words. For because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. The whole, your sin isn't that bad, God's not angry about sin, is not a new line of thought. This goes back to the early first century. It goes back to before then. This is why the children of Israel get exiled. It's why Adam and Eve get kicked out of the garden. So it goes all the way back. God knows that it goes all the way back. But that's why when we sin, it incurs God's wrath. When we do those things which are against Him, it incurs His wrath. So don't do it. It is when we sin that we incur His wrath. So don't do it. Stop it. As the Kleenex box says. But therefore don't be partakers with them. It's a brilliant piece of advice. If I know that there is a group that's about to get in trouble, I don't join the group. Right? We look at that and we go, I know that there's a cop car right around the corner here because I just, I've made the same trick like 4 times today, and I know around the corner there's a cop running radar. I know that everybody else is driving 100 miles an hour down the stretch, but I know that there's a cop who's about to just run them all in. So I'm going to slow down. I'm going to do the speed limit, especially because if I'm driving, it's probably the work truck, and that gets awkward. But there is a sense in which I know if that's going to be the result, I'm going to behave. Okay, let that motivate you. If that's what motivates you, good. Know that it's coming. Don't join with those people. But also, this is where we're picking up in kind of new territory. For you formerly were darkness, but now you're light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. You used to be like those people. That's why we have testimonies and why we have those BC days, before Christ. Before Christ, I would have kicked my dog, lied to my wife, and, because that's who I was. I didn't have a dog and I didn't have a wife, but, because I was 12. But in the grand scheme of things, that notion is there. You used to be like them. Don't be surprised that that's who they are. Because you know how easy it is to be that. You know how natural it is to be that. You know that that is common. You know that that's the route. Why are we surprised when we see that people are broken? We all know that that's where we came from. In order to be a Christian, in order to be redeemed by God, there's a step in there that you go, I'm broken. And I actually really need to be redeemed. I really need to be changed. I really need to be something different than what I am, because what I am is wrong. So we already kind of come with that notion of we're broken. And if we're going to start there, then we know before we were saved and before other people are saved, that's where they are too. So we don't want to partake with them. We don't want to be there. We don't want to be deceived by that. But because we know what that's like, and now we're over here, we should be different. We shouldn't be like everybody else. One of the things that does infuriate me, in case it's not abundantly clear by this point, is when Christians don't act like it. It irritates me when anybody claims to hold a religious viewpoint that they don't actually practice. It drives me nuts. Like we've had this discussion. There was a guy by the name of Joel that was a temporary worker that came and worked at the seminary with us when we just needed, some manual labor kind of a thing. And he was a Buddhist. Yeah, he was a Buddhist. And in Buddhism, cause no harm to any living thing is a rough paraphrase of the mantra. Well, Joel liked to hunt. It irritated the snot out of me. I was like, how do you get away with that? That's your core belief. And if you want to hunt, I don't care. But it goes against the structure. And if you are a Christian and you believe that God is a God of honesty, and you're the biggest cheat and liar, that's a problem. And we have all kinds of Christians who don't act like Christians. It drives me nuts. And there is a real legitimate critique against Christianity because of that. Okay? We should be people who are marked out as different. We should be noticeably different behavior-wise than our lost friends in a consistent sense. Obviously, you're going to get stuff wrong. But what marks you out in your life? Do you have enough consistency of doing things correctly? This is Paul's point. You're a child of the light now. You're supposed to be different. For you formerly were darkness, now you're light. Walk as children of the light. And then, in case you needed it defined, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. So here are three things that should be characteristic of us. Now, these are the most broadest umbrella things. He might as well have just said love. That's the only more broad umbrella that I can find. But there are two things that I think in the first two words that we want to emphasize. First, goodness is how I interact with everybody else. Righteousness is my relationship with God. Goodness is how I relate with you. Now, both of those are affected by the other. If I am not righteous, I'm not going to be good. I might be nice, but goodness and nicety are different. And we're gonna flesh that out in a minute. But also, if I'm not being good to people, then I'm not going to be righteous with God. Okay? If I treat people like scuzz buckets, it's a theological term, don't let me lose you with it, then there is not a right relationship that I have with God. Those two things don't compute. And this is the problem. How we behave evidences what we believe. So when we act like jerks, either we think God is a jerk or we don't know him. One of the two. But here, goodness is the sake of doing the right thing for the right reason. I have friends? We'll use that term in the most loose sense that I possibly can. People I know who were nice to each other, okay? Who were pleasant with each other. And they will do nice things for people that are incredibly nice. But they're horrible people, and their whole motivation is this is just what people in society do. I cook a meal for you. I'm good. Affirm that I am a great person while I rail about how horrible of a person I am. No, you're a horrible person. You're just doing a nice gesture. It's different. And that's what a lot of, unfortunately, I think I see in Christianity, is we do nice things because that's what nice people do. No. Goodness is, I see your need and I meet it, because that's what happens. It is an inner tick. If my inner tick is, I'm obligated to help you because this is what we do. Okay, that's not the same as, oh, you have a need, I'll help you out. These are very differing things. Goodness is, I have the resources, I can help you, or even if I don't have the resources, I'll help you. That's goodness. Nice is just, yeah, I can kick a few bucks over there, that's not a big deal. Okay, these are the differences. Goodness is how I treat you, or how you treat me. Righteousness is how I live in relation to God. So, those things which I know to be a wedge, I don't do. Much like if I want to have a relationship with my wife, and I know that she hates X, I don't do X, right? Unless I'm an idiot, and I try very hard not to be an idiot, right? If I know that leaving socks in the middle of the floor is a bugaboo, I don't leave socks in the middle of the floor. Thankfully, that's not a bugaboo, because I leave my socks in the middle of the floor. But my shoes go up close to something, because we'll trip over those, we don't trip over socks, right? So I don't want to make my wife, I know that it's a thing, I know that it's a stumbling block in a very real sense. That's a funny example that I didn't think of before. But, I know, so I don't do it. It's the same as my relationship with God. I know that God is offended when so I don't do that. I know that God has a problem when I lie, so I don't lie. I know God has a problem if I steal, so I won't steal. It's just should be that simple. I don't know why this is a complicated concept, but clearly it's been complicated from the beginning because Paul's writing to his home church and includes it in the letter, even if it is just a side note. But also in truth. And this one is a great qualifier, right? Because again, there are those things that I can do that you think I'm doing the right thing for the right reasons. I think it was JFK who said you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Well, you can't fool God ever. So good luck with that one. But there is a certain bit of in truth. Am I genuine when I say? Am I genuine when I meet your need? Is there an actual truthfulness? Or am I playing the part? Right? Because I got to spend some time back at my home country of Virginia. And man, I forget how weird it is there. I used to think y'all were weird, but now I've lived here long enough that I can go, I don't know, they're kind of weird. But there's a lot of civil nicety, because it's the old South still. Where, and you know these people, where you do things for people because you're supposed to. There's an obligation of, well, they're family, we got to do that. And what I like about Missouri is y'all got weird relatives, you just, they're weird, we're done with them. I'm not going to the reunion, they're crazy. Bless you for this freedom. I'm going to take that back home with me. Because I got plenty of weirdos in my tree. In case y'all were ever in doubt, I am not a first generation weirdo. It is I'm a weirdo of weirdos, okay? I'm normal, but they're, because I found Jesus. But anyways, back to the actual thrust here. So the notion is that I do it for the real reason. I'm not playing a part. I'm not trying to convince you. I don't want them to know. There is a real genuineness to, because of who I am, there's an outflowing of what I do. Eventually, you will get tired of playing a part. Eventually, everybody just gets tired of that. It grows old. And whatever person we're trying to make happy, eventually, in the South, there are tons of people who go to church because grandma or mama expects them to be there. Well, eventually, grandma and mama die. Then what happens? Oh, well, then truth comes. then the kid goes to college, and then we see what really happened. That's why I think it's like 73% of the active kids in church quit church when they turn 18. That's the active kids. That's not counting the peripheral, kind of over here, shows up every now and then group. But that's the notion is that they weren't doing things in truth. Who we are comes out. So also here, what is defining of Christians, or should be, is verse 10, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. Now, the actual word here, and I don't know why the New American goes trying to learn, is proving. It is the sense of putting to the test. It is not me groping my way through the dark. I'm not Scrabble. Scrabble is an actual word meaning to grope frantically. It's a great, now you know, the more you know. And that's how I feel when I play Scrabble. I'm just groping frantically for a word. I hate that game. I cannot spell. Dyslexia and spelling games are not friends. Okay? It is not, Boggle, same way. At least it's interesting because the letters are already there and in weird. Anyways, back to topic. Squirrel on a bike. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with that. But it is proving. It is me putting to the test in one sense of, does God like it when I'm honest? Well, I'll be honest. Let's find out. And in one sense, it's in that proving. I'll reassure myself when this goes the way it should, that God likes honesty. Because he didn't strike me down when I lied. Or he didn't strike me down because I did that backwards. He didn't strike me down when I was honest. And when I had integrity, it turns out better. So clearly this is the path. But also proving it in the sense of, I'm going to prove it to other people. There is an old preacherism that I keep trying to figure out who the first person to say it was. But it's like trying to figure out where the first water flowed from into the ocean. It's just a maddening task. You're the only Bible some people will ever read. So be a good one. And it's that notion. Part of what we are seeing here is that you are proving to people this is what God actually thinks. This is what God, when I become the people that, or the person, because I'm not schizophrenic, I don't think anyways, am I? No, you're good, okay. But that was a really bad joke. That one should get me in trouble. I shouldn't have done that one. But when other people look and go, well, he's a pastor, and I behave incorrectly, then clearly that must not be a big deal to God. Or God's not who God says he is. And it's the same as your lost friends who watch you. If your friends are watching you and you show them, no, I cannot do that. I know that I could get away with it. I know everybody else is doing it. I know that it's even somewhat accepted. But at the end of the day, I can't do it. Then you are proving this is the Christian standard because this is who Christ is. It is a proving of what God actually thinks. Because nothing is more confusing than, well, yes, God is a God of integrity. Watch me go lie, And nothing will confuse your children more if I tell my son, rule number 2 is a knight always protects the princess, right? I mean, we have drilled that one into the boy. If I then go slap my wife around, right? There is something, either I'm not a knight or a knight doesn't protect the princess. One of those two things has to give. So the proving here is not put God to the test in a full sense. It is the notion of, I will demonstrate this is who God is. Christian actually means little Christ. Originally it was an insult. It was the notion that people are like, yeah, you're a little Christ, you little annoying bugger, get out of here. And it was also a way of saying, we're going to do to you what we did to Christ. We threw him on the cross, we'll throw you on the cross. Hakuna Matata, we don't care. I doubt they said Hakuna Matata, but in the grand scheme of things is that notion of prove to people this is what God actually thinks, so do it. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness. They're going to come to nothing. Eventually, all of those things get judged. All of those things come to their end. but instead even expose them. This is not in the jerkish sense of the word. This is not walk around all day long going, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're really wrong, I'm done. Don't be that person. Okay, now there is something to be said about pointing out and helping people to figure out where they're wrong, but be nice. Don't be a jerk. Okay, because when my boss comes into me and says that was stupid, my response to him is not, oh, let me repent of my stupidity. No. Now we're throwing down. Okay, not in a physical way, because he would take me to school. He would not before me. He is a big dude. Who grew up rough. I don't want to mess with him in that sense, but we're going to argue about it until we can work it through. But when he comes to me and says, "Look, I don't think that was the best choice." Oh well, let's walk through my choice of action here. There's a difference. How we bring it to people. If you are bringing it just to be a jerk, shut up. Okay, I know that one's probably going to give me a letter from my 8-year-old, but stop it. Okay. In truth, because you're concerned about their relationship with Christ, then that's different. But just because you got an angry chip on your shoulder and you're looking for a fight, stop that, John. There are enough people with YouTube channels that's what they do. Leave it to the YouTubers, okay? And they'll go down their own rabbit holes. And eventually what's funny to me is how many of those people implode and end up doing the same thing that they're railing against. And I kind of always go, justice. I have a Batman moment and just, justice. But anyway, don't participate in those things. Show them for what they're worth. Not because you have to call them out, but because you're the light. Right? Nothing makes it clearer that there's a shoe in the middle of the floor, because now I'm back to the stumbling block thing, than flipping on the light. And then I can see, oh, my shoe's in the middle of the floor. I should pick that up. But if it's all dark, if we're in a cave, I don't know if there's a shoe in the middle of the floor. It's a cave floor, right? Yeah, okay. But in the grand scheme of things, that's what we're talking about. You live in a way in which you are the light. You show people what it really means to follow Christ, and then they'll realize all these other things are fake. They'll realize, well, I think he's really what Christ would be more like. For it is a disgrace to even speak of these things which are done by them in secret. Right? Sometimes I think we revel too much in exposing things. And we have those friends who tell those testimonies, and it's always fun for me to watch people while they tell testimonies, or watch people as they listen to testimonies, because some people are like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I wish I had thought about that in my younger days. That's not how this is supposed to work. Or they're giving their testimony, and I've used this example a myriad of times of, I used to be horrible, and it was a lot of fun, and now I'm saved, and I don't do any fun. No. What? But this is what we're talking about, is that notion of, we don't revel in these things which are evil. We don't revel and go, oh, if I wasn't such a Christian, then, that's true. Except for the grace of God, you would do the same thing that your lost friends are doing. Let's make no mistake about that. It is the restraining love of God that keeps us from going down that same rabbit hole. Amen. But all things become visible when they are exposed by the light. For everything that becomes visible is light. Not everything that's visible is good, but in the sense of when you cut on a light, you see all of the stuff in the room. It's easier to walk to my bed because I'm the first one, and I can leave the light on for my wife. I can see what's there. If I cut the light off and she's got to go all the way around the room to get to her side of the bed, which is weird because she's on the far side. I don't know, it's weird. But in the course of things, like, she's going to trip over stuff because she can't see it. Which is why I put my shoes not in the middle of the floor. Because I love you. Yeah, I guess it's more two-finger. Anyways, back to the text. But for this reason, it says, okay, so this is me griping just a little bit. I don't know what the it is here. On one hand, typically, This is a quotation of an Old Testament passage. This is not a one-for-one of an Old Testament passage. But the way in which Paul has stated it, I don't think it's a hymn either. The early church had several hymns, and we see fragments of the hymns come into play, where they have poems or they have those things. What I think is most probable here is that either we've paraphrased Isaiah 60, verse 1 and a couple around it, or what I think is much more probable is it's what's called a midrashic. I don't care if you remember that at all, but if you are a musician or you've been around musicians and you've got the timpani drums, if they are in tune correctly, which was always the bane of my tone-deaf existence life, is trying to tune instruments, and you hit this one, you can actually watch the other two, or three, or however many you have, they'll all vibrate a little. The heads on them will, as long as they're in tune, they'll resonate one with the other. The term, being a Jewish term, comes from actually the notion you can do it on a harp as well. But I found less people have ever played a harp, which if you can play the harp, we need to talk because that's cool. But if you pluck one harp string and they're in tune, and I don't even know how you tune a harp, then they'll resonate as well. I think that's what we have here, is that it's kind of a summarizing of several different passages from Isaiah and several different ideas from the Old Testament. But I reserve the right to be wrong on that. I don't normally like not knowing, but I can't run this one down enough. But the point here is, awake sleeper, the one who is, I'm a Christian, I don't feel motivated to do anything Christian. Okay, you need to wake up out of that because you're dreaming. You're not really. And arise from the dead. This is that notion of you need to come to Christ. You need to figure out who Christ is. You need to stop being one who just is talking and going through the motions. You need to be one who is really coming to Christ. You need to, if you're going to claim Christianity, own it. Be a Christian. Stop playing at it. Stop talking about how honesty is important and then going and lying to everybody. Being integrity or having integrity and then cheating on every possible thing that you can cheat on. Stop that. Come, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. This notion is most closely related again to Isaiah 60 verse 1, and in its context, and in the contexts that are close to this verse in Isaiah, it is that notion of Israel making a claim to be God's people, and then going and living in total opposite of what that would look like. Much like my friend who says he was Buddhist, and then he would go and hunt. No, you're not Buddhist. I guess he could claim whatever. But in the scheme of things, this is the problem. Stop claiming it if you're not going to walk it. This is what that purpose that he's getting across is that we have to be people who our beliefs dictate into our actions. You cannot separate how you behave from what you believe. What you really believe comes through. So when people tell us, well, yeah, I'm a Christian, I just kick my dog a lot. No. Well, I'm a Christian, I just cheat every chance I get. No. Well, I'm a Christian, but I don't ever feel the need together with God's people. No. It's not how this works. Your evidence is how you behave consistently. Not how you behave in church, but if I ask your coworkers, the fellow students in your school, are you marked out by being different? If you are, great. And if that's a long-term thing, congratulations, you've probably gotten it. And I'll leave it in probably because I'm not allowed to judge if you're actually in or not. That one, God got a little angry about when people tried to steal his thunder. I'll learn from other people's mistakes. But in the scheme of things, if they go, well, they're not any different than us, it's a problem. We have those relatives, all of us do, who, yeah, they're Christian, they just don't, No, that's not how this works. And that's what Paul is getting at here. And he's going to push us into making sure that we are behaving well. Not for the sake of goodness sake, because Santa Claus is coming to town and there's a reward, but because we are reflecting who Christ is. At its core, we behave as followers of Christ, like Christ, so other people will know who Christ is. That is the benefit, that's the calling, and that's the command. And when we do that, it helps back up and validate, I don't need to make up a word, there's a real word for that, and validate the claims that we say we believe. When we walk out the door and deny Jesus by our lifestyle, we make it a lie. We make Christ a liar, and that's a problem. Father God, we thank you that you are the